The way many people consume avocado may be canceling out its ability to prevent dementia and recover memory. Just eating it is not enough. What matters is how, when, and with what it is integrated. I am Dr. Hideaki Sumitomo, dedicated to eating habits and brain wellness, with more than 18 years of experience. For years, I have seen how many people incorporate healthy foods expecting that, by themselves, they will generate a visible change. Avocado is usually among the first. It is perceived as something good, almost automatic. However, the body does not work by accumulating ingredients. It works by balance. In everyday practice, a healthy food does not compensate for other imbalances that are maintained day after day. Eating avocado does not correct lack of rest. It does not neutralize forced digestion. It also does not replace regularity in schedules or the way one eats. Thinking that adding something good fixes everything is an understandable idea, but incomplete. In Japan, without needing to turn it into a written rule, something very simple is observed. The body responds better when it is not pushed. Foods are not used to cover previous excesses, but to accompany a general state. That is why, when I talk about avocado and memory, I never do so as the protagonist. I see it as support, not as an isolated solution. The brain, especially as time passes, needs stability. When eating is disordered, when each meal is different in rhythm and combination, the body enters a state of constant adaptation. In that context, no food manages to stand out. Not because it is useless, but because the internal environment does not favor it. Many people believe that the benefit lies in quantity or frequency. In reality, it lies in the consistency of the whole. An irregular habit does not become effective by adding a healthy ingredient. It becomes more confusing. The body receives mixed messages and responds slowly or with unclear signals. From a practical perspective, avocado provides softness. It does not stimulate. It does not accelerate. It can accompany processes that require time, such as mental clarity or the feeling of stability, but only when it is inserted into a relatively ordered base. Otherwise, it goes unnoticed. In Japan, even in modern contexts, overloading a meal with too many elements is avoided, not out of restriction, but out of understanding. The simpler the plate, the easier it is for the body to process it. And when digestion flows effortlessly, the brain also works with less interference. This is key. Many people seek to support memory without first observing how their digestion is functioning. Without realizing it, they demand mental clarity while the body is busy resolving excesses. In that scenario, avocado does not fail. It simply gets overshadowed. That is why I insist on something that may seem unremarkable, but is fundamental. The body needs coherence. It is not about eating perfectly, but about not constantly contradicting oneself. When one day one eats calmly and the next in a hurry, when heavy foods are mixed with soft ones, the organism enters a back and forth that hinders any positive effect. Avocado, seen from this logic, fulfills a secondary but valuable role. It can provide stable satiety, accompany other preparations, and help ensure that the meal does not generate peaks. But it is not designed to fix a disordered routine. I have noticed that many older people begin to perceive small changes when they stop seeking quick solutions and start sustaining simple habits. Not because they do something spectacular, but because they stop interfering. That is where avocado starts to make sense as support. The mistake is not in consuming it. The mistake is in expecting it to act alone. No food works in isolation within the body. Everything interacts, everything adds or subtracts according to the context. When this is understood, the frustration of not noticing anything disappears. And even doing this, there is something else that almost no one looks at. Over the years, I understood that one of the most common questions about any food is also the least useful. Many people want to know how much to eat or how often to do it. However, the body rarely responds first to that logic. It responds to the form, to how a food integrates within a meal, and the effort it demands from the digestive system. Avocado has a particular texture. It is not dry, not light, not stimulating. It is an enveloping, stable texture that can accompany or hinder, depending on the context. When it is integrated without observing the whole plate, its effect dilutes, not because it is negative, but because it gets trapped within a preparation that demands too much from the body. In Japan, even in simple everyday meals, attention is paid to something that usually goes unnoticed in other contexts: the clarity of the plate. It is not about aesthetics or tradition. It is about bodily understanding. The fewer contradictory messages the organism receives at the same time, the more efficient its response. That efficiency is the basis of balance. Many people believe that a healthy food can compensate for a disordered meal. Avocado is often used with that intention. It is added thinking that it softens, corrects, balances. In practice, when the rest of the plate is heavy or confusing, the soft food loses its support capacity. It does not stand out, it does not accompany, it simply passes without leaving a trace. The body does not process isolated foods. It processes combinations. It processes overlapping textures, rhythms that accelerate or interrupt, stimuli that compete with each other. When a meal contains too many layers, the digestive system enters effort mode. And when that happens, the brain stops being a priority. And before continuing, it is important to remember something essential. Always consult your trusted doctor. That is why I insist so much on the form. Not because it is a minor detail, but because it defines the internal context. A simple plate does not mean a poor plate. It means a plate understandable to the body. In Japan, even in modern versions of eating, mixing just for the sake of mixing is avoided. Each element has a recognizable place. That external clarity translates into greater internal stability. Avocado works better when it does not try to star, when it is not forced to do something. Integrated naturally, its texture can help make the meal feel more uniform, less abrupt. That uniformity reduces digestive load, and when digestion flows without tension, the mind usually feels less saturated. I have seen many people who consume avocado within very dense preparations, with multiple stimuli at the same time. The result is usually the same. There is no evident discomfort, but neither is there a feeling of lightness or clarity. The food gets neutralized by the context. The way avocado is integrated defines whether its presence adds or simply dilutes. When incorporated into a simple plate without excess contrasts, it can fulfill its role as accompaniment. It does not accelerate processes. It does not stimulate. It provides silent stability. Another key aspect is the rhythm of the meal. Not only what is eaten matters, but how it is eaten. Eating quickly without pauses forces the body to work hurriedly. Even soft foods can feel heavy when the rhythm is chaotic. In Japan, that rhythm is naturally cared for. It is not dramatized. It is simply respected. The brain responds to that rhythm more than one might think. When digestion occurs under pressure, the mind usually feels scattered or clouded. Not due to lack of nutrients, but because the system is prioritizing resolving the urgent. In that state, no food manages to support mental clarity. Avocado, consumed within a calm meal without hurry, can favor a subsequent feeling of stability. It does not manifest as an immediate or striking effect. It manifests as absence of interferences. The mind does not feel forced, does not feel overstimulated. Many people expect to notice an evident change. But in these cases, what is noticed is what stops happening. Less heaviness, less need to compensate. less feeling of saturation. That type of support is subtle, but over time it becomes valuable. In the Japanese view, one does not seek to maximize benefits. One seeks to reduce frictions. That difference completely changes the relationship with foods. When digestive friction is reduced, the body enters a more stable state. And from that state, mental clarity is sustained more easily. It is also important to observe coherence between meals. When one day one eats simply and the next too many stimuli are mixed, the body enters constant back and forth. Consistency does not mean rigidity. It means not contradicting oneself all the time. Avocado, integrated regularly within clear plates, begins to fulfill a silent role. It does not correct excesses. It does not cover errors. It simply stops being a burden and starts adding from a discrete place. I have noticed that many people begin to feel more stable when they stop seeking quick solutions and start observing how they assemble their meals. They do not make drastic changes, they simplify, and that simplification frees the body from unnecessary effort. Memory and mental clarity do not respond well to chaos. They respond to stability, and that stability usually begins in something as everyday as the way a food is integrated into the plate. That is why, beyond which food is chosen, the way it is consumed ends up being determining. Avocado is no exception. When integrated with coherence within an ordered context, it can accompany processes that require time and patience. But even making it simple, the timing is still key. Before continuing, I want to remind everyone listening that subscribing to our channel will give you access to this vital information. Let's continue. The body does not behave the same throughout the day, not because the foods change, but because the internal state in which they are received changes. Digestion, available energy, and concentration capacity vary naturally. Ignoring that variation is one of the reasons why many people feel that the same food sometimes works and sometimes not. It is not about fixed schedules or rigid rules. It is about observing how the body responds at different times. There are moments when the organism is more receptive and others when it is busy resolving fatigue, tension, or accumulation of stimuli. In those moments, any food takes a back seat. In Japan, this observation is part of everyday life. It is not talked about as a method. It is simply respected. If the body is loaded, it is simplified. If it is lighter, it is accompanied. That flexibility avoids forcing processes that later translate into feelings of heaviness or mental confusion. Avocado is a good example of this. It can feel kind in one moment and completely neutral in another, not because the food changes, but because the internal context is different. When digestion is fluid, the body better integrates what it receives. When it is slow or over-demanded, even soft foods can generate interferences. Many people seek to support their memory without paying attention to this point. They consume appropriate foods, but at times when the body is not available, the result is usually disappointment. They notice no changes and conclude that it doesn't work. In reality, the body was busy with another task. The relationship between digestion and mental clarity is direct. When the digestive system is working with effort, the brain reduces its level of secondary activity. It is not a failure, it is a biological priority. Resolve the urgent first. In that state, asking for mental clarity is unrealistic. In Japanese practice, eating in states of evident tension is avoided, not as a prohibition, but as a logical observation. Eating when the body is contracted usually generates a heavier response afterward, and that heaviness is not always felt in the stomach. Many times it is felt in the mind. The time of day also influences the internal rhythm. There are phases when the body is more open and others when it becomes slower. Respecting that rhythm does not require technical knowledge. It requires attention. Sensations like slowness, discomfort, or lack of focus are usually clear signals. Avocado, when consumed at an appropriate time, can accompany a feeling of stability. It does not stimulate or accelerate. It simply does not interfere. That absence of interference is key to sustaining mental clarity, especially in advanced ages. When consumed at an inappropriate time, its effect goes unnoticed. It does not generate evident discomfort, but neither does it contribute. Edward, it is neutralized by the general state of the body. This explains why two people can consume the same thing and have completely different sensations. In Japan, the response after eating is observed a lot. The food itself is not analyzed, but how the body feels afterward. That constant observation adjusts habits without the need for external rules. Over time, it becomes natural to choose the most convenient moment. Many people eat the same way every day, regardless of how they feel. The body adapts, but it does so by sacrificing stability. That constant adaptation ends up gradually affecting mental clarity, almost imperceptibly. When one starts paying attention to the moment when one eats, many discomforts soften without changing the food. One simply stops going against one's own rhythm. That internal coherence frees energy that was previously destined to compensate. Avocado does not correct a bad time of day. It is not designed for that, but it can accompany very well when the body is aligned. Understanding this difference avoids exaggerated expectations and unnecessary frustration. Listening to bodily signals is not something abstract. It is noticing how the mind feels after eating. If there is heaviness, if there is dispersion, if there is slowness, those signals do not appear by chance. They are useful information. In Japan, even older people maintain this attention without dramatizing it. They do not make extreme changes. They adjust. They simplify. They wait. That patience sustains mental stability in the long term. Fluid digestion usually goes hand in hand with a clearer mind. When digestion becomes forced, the mind rarely feels clear. This relationship is not immediate, but it is constant. Ignoring it generates confusion. Avocado, integrated at an appropriate time, can support slow and sustained processes. It is not noticed as a specific effect, but as a general feeling of balance. When consumed outside that context, it simply passes without leaving a trace. This does not mean avoiding, but observing. Choosing the right moment is usually more important than changing the food. That observation is what makes the difference over time. It would be interesting if you told us in the comments, have you ever stopped to observe how your body feels after eating at different times of the day, yes or no? We want to know your experience. One of the most difficult ideas to accept when talking about memory and nutrition is that not all bodies react the same way. We live surrounded by messages that promise clear and visible results, but the reality of the human organism is much more discrete. Each person starts from a different point and responds according to their own internal rhythm. The body is not a uniform system. It has history. It accumulates habits, tensions, imbalances, and adaptations. When a food like avocado is introduced into the routine, that food does not arrive on empty ground. It arrives in an already formed context. That is why two people can do the same thing and experience completely different sensations. In Japan, this difference is assumed as something natural. It is not expected that everyone responds the same, nor are comparisons sought. The attention is placed on personal evolution, not on someone else's result. That perspective avoids unrealistic expectations and reinforces the credibility of the process. Many people expect noticeable changes, something that feels immediate and confirms that it is working. However, when we talk about memory and mental clarity, changes are usually silent. They do not appear as an event, but as a stability that is gradually built. that stability is not always recognized at first glance. One of the most important factors is consistency, not a strict or obsessive consistency, but a calm continuity. The body needs coherent repetition to adapt. When habits change all the time, the organism cannot settle and the effects dilute. I have observed that many people give up too quickly. They try something for a few days, feel nothing striking, and conclude that it does not work. In reality, the body is still adjusting. Real processes do not usually give spectacular signals at the beginning. In Japanese practice, a meal is not evaluated by how it feels that same day. It is observed how the body feels over weeks. If there are fewer ups and downs, if there is more stability, if the mind feels less saturated, that prolonged observation allows noticing changes that would otherwise go unnoticed. The way each person perceives their own body also influences. Some are very connected to their internal sensations. Others only register evident changes. That perceptual difference explains why someone can say, "I notice nothing," while in reality, their body is responding gradually. The organism does not always communicate by adding sensations. Many times it does so by subtracting discomforts, less heaviness, less dispersion, less feeling of mental saturation. These changes often go unnoticed because they do not generate immediate impact, but they are important signals. In Japan, a lot of attention is paid to these subtle changes. They are not minimized or discarded. They are considered part of the process. That attitude reduces anxiety for quick results and allows sustaining simple habits for longer. Another key point is the baseline state from which each person starts. Someone with many years of digestive or mental disorder will not perceive changes in the same way as someone who already has some stability. First, the body needs to settle. Only then can it respond differently. Nutrition does not act like a switch that turns on or off. It works more like a fine adjustment, and fine adjustments do not make noise. They generate balance. That balance is what, over time, can support memory. I have seen situations where a person says they notice no effect, but at the same time, stops experiencing discomforts that were previously frequent. When I pointed out, only then do they recognize it. Not because it did not happen, but because they were not looking for that type of signal. Constant comparison also works against it. Seeing that another person says they feel better can generate doubts or frustration. In Japan, that comparison is avoided. Each body follows its own path. Forcing parallels only distorts perception. That is why it is important to understand that not everyone will notice the same thing, nor at the same time, nor in the same way, and that does not invalidate the process. On the contrary, it makes it more realistic. Recognizing this diversity is what increases credibility and reduces false promises. Avocado, integrated within coherent habits, can act as support, not as the protagonist, not as a unique solution. Its effect, when it appears, does so gradually and personally. Expecting something else usually leads to unnecessary disappointments. Accepting that changes are subtle does not mean resigning oneself. It means adjusting the gaze. Observing with more attention and less anxiety. That attitude allows sustaining habits without frustration. In Japan, even in advanced stages, this patience is maintained. The body is not demanded quick responses. It is given time. That kinder relationship with the process is part of what sustains stability in the long term. Memory and mental clarity do not transform overnight. They are built or deteriorate slowly. That is why any real support also acts slowly. Understanding this avoids unrealistic expectations and reinforces trust. And before continuing, it is important to remember something essential. Always consult your trusted doctor, but first, At what moments do you feel your mind is more stable, even if there are no striking changes? Tell me in the comments, I want to know. One of the biggest mistakes when talking about foods and memory is expecting quick results. We live in a culture accustomed to immediate effects, and that distorts the way real body processes are evaluated. Memory does not respond to abrupt stimuli. It responds to sustained conditions in the long term. Avocado is not a food that activates, pushes, or shakes the organism. Its function, when integrated correctly, is much more discreet. It does not generate energy peaks or striking sensations. And precisely because of that, many people believe that it does nothing. In reality, it does something very different. It accompanies. In Japan, this idea is very present in the everyday way of eating. The body is not sought to be provoked, but to be kept stable. Foods are not chosen to feel something immediate, but to not alter the general balance. That logic is especially important when talking about memory and mental clarity. The brain does not need constant stimuli, it needs continuity. When the body enters cycles of ups and downs, the mind usually follows that back and forth. That is why approaches that promise quick effects rarely sustain results. Avocado does not work in that logic. Its role is support, not intervention. Many people expect to notice a clear change after a few days. When that does not happen, they discard the habit. However, real processes usually manifest differently. Less accumulated mental fatigue, less feeling of saturation, greater feeling of stability over the weeks. In the Japanese view, a food is not evaluated by what it generates in the short term. It is observed how it accompanies the general state over time. If the body remains more even, if the mind fluctuates less, if there is less need to compensate, those are more reliable indicators than any specific sensation. Avocado does not stimulate the brain. It does not accelerate functions. It does not promise immediate improvements. And that, far from being a disadvantage, is one of its greatest virtues. Constant stimuli usually exhaust. Memory, on the other hand, benefits from regularity. When consumed within a set of coherent habits, avocado can contribute to a more stable base feeling. It is not perceived as a protagonist. It is perceived as something that does not interfere. That absence of interference is key to sustaining mental clarity over time. Another important aspect is understanding that memory does not improve linearly. There are better days and heavier days. Expecting constant progression usually generates frustration. In Japan, that variability is accepted as part of the process. The important thing is not to avoid difficult days, but to reduce extremes. Avocado, by not generating peaks, helps avoid those extremes. It does not elevate or drop. It stays in the middle. That moderation favors internal stability, and stability is the ground on which memory can be sustained. Many people confuse absence of stimulus with absence of effect. But in the body, especially as years pass, what does not exhaust is usually what contributes the most. Accumulated wear is one of the great enemies of mental clarity. Reducing it is a more effective strategy than trying to compensate with stimuli. In Japan, even in advanced ages, habits that do not tire the body are privileged. Constant novelty is not pursued. Calm repetition is prioritized. That repetition builds a more predictable internal environment, and the brain responds better to the predictable than to the chaotic. The long term is not usually attractive in discourse, but it is where real changes occur. Memory is sustained or deteriorates slowly. That is why any true support also acts gradually. Expecting something else is demanding from the body something it cannot give. I have observed that when people accept this approach, anxiety for results decreases. They stop evaluating each day as a test. They start looking at whole weeks. That change of perspective reduces frustration and improves adherence to simple habits. Avocado, integrated regularly and coherently, can accompany that process. It does not promise spectacular improvements. It promises continuity, and continuity in the human body is a form of care. It is also important to understand that not everyone will perceive the same benefit. Some will notice greater clarity, others will simply feel fewer ups and downs. Both effects are valid. Both speak of support, not direct intervention. Memory is not pushed. It is cared for. It is protected from excesses, peaks, unnecessary demands. Avocado, when consumed with that intention, fits well into a long-term care strategy. In Japan, this way of understanding nutrition avoids disappointments. No one expects miracles. Coherence is expected. And that coherence, sustained over time, usually gives better results than any quick solution. That is why closing unrealistic expectations is fundamental. It is not about doing more, but doing better. Less stimulus, more regularity, fewer promises, more observation. Avocado does not act as a trigger. It acts as a silent companion. Its value is in what it does not provoke, in what it does not disorder, in what it does not exhaust. When this is understood, the way of evaluating it changes. It stops being a food from which something immediate is expected and becomes part of a whole that sustains stability. Now, if you want to continue learning, watch the next video. The content of this channel uses characters for educational and informational purposes, based on public sources, studies, and general research. It does not intend to diagnose, treat, or replace professional medical recommendations. Each person is different. Always consult your trusted doctor before applying any advice related to health, nutrition, supplements, or exercises.